All right. Thank you so much for the introduction. And thank you, Kristen, as our soon-to-be graduated student representative, for being here tonight. And of course, thank you to everybody who has decided to sign up for this session and join us to learn more about the Learning and Teaching in Social Context EdD program. Before I get too into my presentation here, I would like to just encourage folks to introduce themselves using the chat feature. We've only got an hour for this session, so normally I would like to go around and have people introduce themselves and share a little bit about why they're here. But I think for time's sake, doing that in the chat will probably be a bit more efficient. So just a brief introduction, who you are, if you want to share a little bit about what you do, and then what brought you to this session tonight. We would just love to know who's out in the audience. Okay, so while you all are working on that, I'll dive into this presentation, and these slides will be available to you, and I think the recording will be as well. So if I go through anything too quickly, I will try to pause throughout to make sure that I can answer any questions that may arise. But if there's anything that I go through and then you think about it and have follow-up questions later on, you can always reach out to me, rewatch the video, review the slides, etc. Again, my name is Tiffany Corrales-Noel. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am the director of this amazing program that's filled with incredible students. I am also a clinical associate professor, so I teach quite a few courses within the program and have directed some of our PhD programs as well. So lots of experience around program directorship and graduate student advising, as well as graduate level teaching, and really love every aspect of my work and our department in the Graduate School of Education as a whole. So what I'm going to talk through as our key agenda items for today is the mission and identity of the program, to just understand like the ethos that really underpins the work that students do in this program, the signature pedagogies that we use throughout the teaching and learning experience, the sequence and milestones. And so especially for those of you who might be full-time professionals, you've got other things going on in your life, like how would this all fit into my life, is definitely a conversation that we'll have. And then a little bit of information on how to apply for the program. And like I said, I'll stop throughout to see if there are questions, but there will also be a dedicated Q&A period towards the end of the presentation before we wrap up around 7 p.m. Eastern tonight. Any quick questions about the agenda? Okay, all right, moving right along. So a brief introduction to the Graduate School of Education, which is the school in which the Department of Learning and Instruction resides. So here we are committed to creating an inclusive learning environment where we see diverse perspectives as sources of strength. We respect diverse perspectives. We welcome diverse perspectives. And one of the ways that this is reflected right in our program, if anybody was on the call while Duvie and Kristen and I were talking earlier, this is a program that really welcomes students who might be coming from K-12 or higher ed or health education or even business environments. As reflected in the title of this program, Learning and Teaching in Social Contexts, you can kind of make the case that anything is a social context, right? Like social context is a broad description, and learning and teaching can happen in all of those spaces. So one of the most exciting parts about working in this program for me is that as much as I am here to, help guide the process alongside my colleagues and teach research methods and how to do the type of research that leads to practical and actionable outcomes, I'm often learning so much from all of the students who are in this program as well, because of the diverse, professional spheres where they have expertise, their diverse lived experiences. So it really is like, if you're somebody who's motivated and inspired by like a true community of learners where we are all like learning from and with each other, this is definitely created as that type of environment. We also, within the Graduate School of Education, we focus on local to global impact. We view education, as an inclusive community that extends beyond our university walls. So the groundbreaking teaching and research that we're doing can have ripple effects and impacts even beyond, our university or the local context where we do our work. It can create models and paradigms for other contexts to help drive continuous improvement efforts. And these are the types of improvement efforts that cut across, educational and social and economic opportunities that can be opened up for individuals and communities by engaging in our process. And, just kind of considering the socio-political context in which we find ourselves, I consider this work like never having been more important, having people who can drive evidence-based research that informs practice that has positive impacts on communities. So it's definitely a leading edge place to be and to learn how to be an evidence-based leader. So our program identity, and this is our program mission, which might be familiar to you if you've perused the website, but designed within an actionable, justice-focused framework, our Doctor of Education program in learning and teaching in social contexts blends contemporary theory and practice across synergistic learning experiences to produce the next generation of educational professionals dedicated to addressing emergent and persistent problems of practice. So at this stage, I always like to let folks know who are maybe they're considering a doctorate and maybe you have found yourself considering a PhD or an EdD and what is sort of the right fit for me. I really want to emphasize the theory and practice piece that's noted in this program mission. So, while a traditional PhD program really focuses on, going deep into theory, understanding theory, building theory, and putting knowledge out into the world, like publishing the papers that you have probably pulled to inform your research papers in various aspects of your academic and professional career. This program is about, using theory to guide and inform and frame our work. But the purpose of the dissertations that we do in this program is really to lead to those like practical and actionable outcomes. So a lot of people who might opt for the EdD route are people who are thinking like, I've observed this problem. Maybe it's a recent problem or it's been a persistent ongoing problem. And I have always viewed it as something that I want to do something about, right? Like I want to improve it, maybe not overnight, but through iterative cycles of continuous inquiry over the course of time, I want to improve that problem. And you want to like take action to do it. So it's gathering the knowledge to understand what are the factors that are maybe producing and constraining this problem. And then how am I going to leverage the insights that I've garnered through going on this research process into actually taking the steps and the actions to drive those solutions and drive those improvements. So you have a lot, still of the theory and the research side that a PhD path offers, but with that added component of being able to take the action and have, the practical insight necessary to make the change. And so we see a lot of people who are driven by improving like their leadership skills. Maybe you want to make a career pivot, or maybe you're interested in remaining in your current career, but looking how to like level up those leadership experiences in some ways. We see all different kinds of motivations for people coming into this program, but what we can guarantee that you will leave with is a developed knowledge of theory and how to put that theory into action. Another really valuable part of our program is the Carnegie Project on the Education Doctorate, which is a consortium that we are members of as an institution. And what that means for our program is that the way that it's designed and the way that it's implemented and even the way that we evaluate it is all grounded in like the cutting edge best practices of what Doctor of Education programs around the country are doing. And so there's like, at this point, I want to say they almost have 200 member institutions. The Carnegie Project Consortium has really grown. And so what it does for me as somebody who's a faculty member and a program director ensures that I'm keeping up with like the latest trends and making sure that, my colleagues are aware of those trends so that we can continuously infuse them into improving our program, which is very reflective of what we're trying to get you all as students, to develop in your own, professional toolkit. And then the other thing that's great about it is they have various opportunities for engagement for students and faculty and program directors alike. But there is one in particular, there's an annual convening that can be really wonderful for students to attend because you get to learn about all of the different types of research projects that students at other universities are working on. You can share your research. So this is very much like our equivalent of, a major conference in our field. By being an EdD student, you are becoming a part of this community through joining us at UB. And so here are some pictures. So we just went to the CPED convening last month in October, and it was held in Hawaii this year. So that was pretty amazing. Next year, it will be held in Philly. So maybe not as glamorous as going to Hawaii. But of course, Philly is an excellent city. And for anybody who lives, in or around New York State, certainly a little bit more accessible to get to. And so if that interests you and you're excited, about joining our program or getting involved in this community in some way, you can keep that on your radar. And here are just some pictures of some of the great students. The two that are on the left here, James and Katie, are graduates of our program. And then Jenny, who is standing right here next to me in the picture, will be graduating this spring. So they all did a really great job presenting, and we're looking forward to continued participation and engagement in that consortium as our program builds. Okay, let me pause there and see if there are any questions thus far. Okay. And if anything comes through the chat that I might miss in sifting through all of the intros, somebody please let me know too. Okay, moving right along. So talking about sequence. So this is a 3-year part-time online program. And so what that looks like across the 3 years and how it builds is that we think like this is conceptually, and the sequence is summer, fall, spring, summer, fall, spring, summer, fall, spring. So you start in the summer semester and you'll graduate in the spring semester at the end of your 3rd year. Students are typically expected to take a minimum of two courses per semester, which is the equivalent of 6 credits. And of course, if you are like affiliated with, UUP or the SUNY system, I know that there are benefits there to credits that can be covered. And so that there sometimes are questions around that, and certainly happy to answer those during our Q&A. So year 1, so what does this look like at kind of a high level? Students get to participate in a set of learning experiences that are, of course, aligned with the Graduate School of Education's identity. We're looking for, transformation of practice and educational leadership, looking at school improvement as a matter of justice, and scholarship focused relentlessly on problems of practice. So problems of practice, the types of problems where we can design research that leads to actionable change opportunities. Year 2, so now year 1, you've laid that foundation. You're probably exploring the problem that you came into the program wanting to study, but understanding it at a much deeper level, and understanding it and all of the different types of factors that influence and are influenced by that problem in lots of new ways. So it's sort of that metaphor of like peeling back all of the onion layers and being like, I thought the problem was this, and after all of this learning, I'm now realizing that what I perceived to be the problem is actually more like the effects of a much deeper problem or a totally different problem, right? And that's like a really, productive exercise to go through, not just for the purposes of developing the skills to do your dissertation and practice, but also in just how we think about future problem solving, right? Like you're really developing these skills and competencies that can be applied to so many other areas of life beyond what you do in this program. Year 2, so this is where students get a little bit more into methods. So it's developing the capacity to formulate, communicate, and engage problems of practice. So instead of that process of more like learning about the problem, understanding the problem, contextualizing it, it's like, now how am I going to start learning the methods that I can use to actually like do something about this problem, right? Or figure out ways to study it that can lead to those actionable insights. And so years 1 and 2, you definitely have more of like the coursework foundation being laid. And then year 3 is where students are primarily at this point, if students are following our curriculum map, which I'll share a little bit more about in a few slides, most students are no longer taking coursework during year 3. They are just working on data collection, analysis, and the reporting of their dissertation. And so that when you are following the curriculum map and the way we've laid it out, all of that part-time work that you're spending on this program is more about driving forward the research and the dissertation, and less about the traditional coursework experience of, like readings and assignments and that sort of thing. But that said, there is still, of course, like flexibility built into the program and the way that it is scaffolded. So if you're, just somebody who has kind of like a unique circumstance in terms of how you might want to approach your coursework, we are always open to that conversation, and you can feel free to reach out to me about those questions. So here, some of the signature pedagogies that inform the sequence I was just describing. So the first one is collaborative and inquiry-based learning. So we call that our coursework centering on a problem of practice, which is related to what I was speaking to before about like a deep, nuanced understanding of your problem, how it exists, why it exists, and what it influences and what it's influenced by. The second is equity-driven and field-based research. So this again is like the methods practice and the methods-based experiences. So you need to learn how and in methodologically rigorous ways how you're going to design the kind of research that can study the types of problems you're proposing. It can be like almost at the beginning, there can be so many big ideas about like, this is a problem and I can't wait to use this dissertation to like solve that problem. And a lot of what happens in our program is like the scaling back and the narrowing and the focusing of that problem to say, we really need to design a dissertation that focuses on something that one study can feasibly like begin to address. And we're equipping you with the research and methodological skills to continuously iterate that research well beyond your time in our program, right? So we might not solve the big problems that you're coming to our program to study in one, 2, 3 years, right? But we're equipping you with the skills to be able to start addressing that problem and then to continue working on, solving it and continuously improving it over the course of time. So again, skills that I think can be really valuable and extend far beyond just earning a degree. Stage 3, the dissertation and practice. So in combination with what you learn through the foundation laid in stage 1 and the methods toolkit developed in stage 2, you develop a dissertation and practice, which is your public statement of doctoral quality research that demonstrates scholarly rigor and practitioner relevance in whatever that might mean for you, right? So like I said before, a whole wide range of problems of practice and studies have been proposed, and we have learned so much from all of them. Okay, so what this looks like just at a glance in terms of the credit breakdown. So this is a 60 total credit degree program. 24 of those credits are for the coursework centering on a problem of practice, and there's one required course there and then 21 electives. I generally give students guidance about like my suggested coursework for them to consider or take especially as I get to learn more about their problems of practice. But I highlight this just so that there is like flexibility in how you customize the program. At the doctoral level, students are coming in to study the problems that they have identified, right? So we can't have a super prescribed curriculum because you all need to develop expertise in your specific problem area, in your specific field. So there are some of the ones that are mentioned here where you can see our required courses because they're listed, but there are also a lot of elective opportunities to really pick the courses that align with your interests and goals. The research methods courses, like learning how to do the research, there's 18 credits required there. One course that like you must take, right? It's an absolute requirement, and then 15 electives that, again, I provide suggestions and guidance as I learn about your proposed work. And then down here, the dissertation and practice, for the most part, what these credits are for these 18 here are not traditional coursework. So up here, coursework centering on a problem of practice and in design and research methods is more like the courses that you have probably taken in other graduate work you've been engaged in, right? For folks who might already have a master's degree or some sort of advanced graduate certificate, things like that. Traditional courses, there's going to be homework, there's going to be assignments, there's going to be readings. The dissertation and practice credits, because it's a doctoral program, these are considered like research credit hours. So you are earning credit often for the time that you are spending working on your research, going out into the field, collecting data, analyzing those data, reporting it, right? So if you're just, again, kind of thinking about how does all of this fit into three full years, it's really the first 2 years that are reflective of a more traditional graduate experience. And then year 3 is where you really kick it into doctoral education mode with a lot of that, self-paced research time. Okay, let me pause there and see if there are any questions.
Was one question from Alexis. She asked, I was wondering about feasibility for taking only one class a term, at least some terms. Does it have to be done within the 3-year mark?
Yeah, so we definitely, I mean, we encourage, working within the 3 years that we have mapped out, but Students have been creative. And so there are times when, let's say that you are somebody whose fall and spring semesters are really busy, but there's like a little bit of a lighter load in the summertime, right? Where there's maybe more room or flexibility. Students might opt to take 3 courses in summer, where you could maybe take one course for like the first 6 weeks and a second course for the second 6 weeks, and then maybe like, a third course during either one of those periods or one of our custom summer sessions. So they're staggered a bit and don't feel like it's so intense all in the same summer. But what that would do is position you well for the following fall, where maybe you only have to take like one course, right? Because you loaded up on your other courses during the summer. So it's certainly like at the end of the day, students need 60 credits in order to graduate from the program, and life circumstances come up, and people, babies are had, and there's health leaves that need to be taken, right? 3 years doesn't always mean a rigid 3 years, but the benefit of working within that 3 year timeline is that you're working with the cohort. So as all of the other members of your cohort are going through these major program milestones, you're going through them together. And I guess not to put you on the spot, Kristen, but if you're cool with jumping in just to like speak to what the benefits, if any, the cohort experience have been for you, that would be great.
Yeah, for sure. So, one of the things that happens is that you're sort of put into an advising group. So these are people that maybe are your studies maybe align in some way, or they're topically connected, or what have you. And so these folks are the people that like I have personally relied on through the time in the program, because we all live locally, so we have gotten together to do like study groups and like writing sessions, and we text all the time and sort of are kind of keeping each other accountable for the work that needs to get done. So in that sense, it's been exceptionally helpful. Particularly, I think because it's an online program, it's sort of sometimes tough to make some of those like personal connections if you're not physically seeing people in the same space, but having this, sort of small group to rely on and connect with has been really helpful.
Thanks for that, Kristen.
You
And
bet.
yeah, and so that's just kind of highlighting one of the reasons that why we like the cohort model in the 3 years, because, and again, it's not like it's the end of the world, and certainly things have happened with students in the cohorts along the way where somebody needs to take a semester or plans change, but we want to keep you as synced up with your cohort as possible, just so that you can go through those milestones together, and you really do have that like stronger sense of community of like other people are going through this too. I can ask them questions about how they're approaching something. And for anybody who is doing doctoral type research for the first time, I think that those types of conversations are invaluable, right? So as a faculty member, I'm always thinking when I'm teaching classes and students ask me questions, I'm like, I've done this a whole lot of times. So what I'm saying is something that I have a lot of practice and experience with, right? But I'm always checking myself and saying to students like, okay, as people who might be hearing this for the first time, like how are you receiving it? How are you interpreting it? And having those groups of students who are working together kind of like helps me check my own explanations, and then they get to have the conversations with each other like, did you understand that? Do you think that we need to go back, and let her know that we're confused about this part? So it really kind of like is a collective accountability, but in a way that I think has been really beneficial. Like all of our students in the cohort that is graduating in spring is really on track for some tremendous success, I think, because of how they have engaged with each other in their small advising groups, even outside of what we have expected as like the program directors and faculty. And that's been pretty amazing to see. So here as just a snapshot of the curriculum map and what this looks like, to be like, okay, you're talking 60 credits, 3 years, like how does that look? So this is, it's a flexible and adaptable curriculum map for the most part, particularly when it comes to the electives. But anything that you see that's marked required on this curriculum map means that it is a course that must be on your transcript in order for you to graduate from this program. That's like written into the transcript report, right? Anything that is strongly suggested are courses that, just as the director of the program, I say like, really don't skip these classes unless maybe you have taken a class that's super, super similar in a previous like graduate program and it just feels too redundant for you. Those might be reasons for an exception at times, but for the most part, I would say students opt to take the strongly suggested because these are still courses that are being taught at a doctoral level. And unless you're coming in with a doctorate, most of it will probably still be new information or more advanced from what might have been taught at the master's level. Um, and then, of course, all of the electives, there's just examples and samples up there of some of the different courses that we offer that are pretty popular options among EdD students. But one of the benefits that I think that UB has in particular, we have 4 departments within our Graduate School of Education. So we have learning and instruction, we have educational leadership and policy, we have counseling and educational psychology, and we have information science. So those are 4 departments with lots of course offerings that sometimes intersect with students' problem of practice interests. So it gives you even more like opportunities for the electives that you might take, even if you sometimes want to take something outside of LAI. And that rings true for the rest of the university as well. So those are the 4 departments within our decanal unit. But as you all probably know, like UB is a pretty large institution with lots of schools and lots of departments. So if you're coming in with a problem of practice that is at the intersection of both education and social work, for example, you might take some of your electives, in the school of school social work, right? Because there might be electives that are in there that make sense for informing and understanding your POP. So again, just a snapshot of the coursework. Kristen, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. So I was just going to say something to that effect. So for my problem of practice, I took a couple of the CC Pop classes in the ed psych area and in social work to help inform my problem of practice. But the caveat I will say though is that sometimes those courses are not offered online. So that may be a conversation that you want to have as you're looking through like the course catalog or at offerings from different departments, just to keep in mind that, they may not have an online option. So just to sort of ask those questions of the faculty member. If they can offer an online version, that's great. The couple that I took were on campus and I'm local to Buffalo, so that wasn't a problem. But just as you're, sort of mapping out your coursework, if there's opportunity to take things that are, perhaps outside of the department, just to double check with the faculty member to make sure that there's an online option.
Great points. Thank you, Kristen. And agree with all of that. I like to see, there's more and more hybrid opportunities, that have been made possible, I guess, through the recent years of doing more teaching and learning online. But for the folks who are local, let's say you come across a course that you really, really want to take and it's only being offered on campus. To Kristen's point, you are still welcome to take that course, but I think the only thing that is a little bit different. I think the cost of the course is a little bit different because of like on-campus, fees or things that you pay for, kind of like using on-campus facilities. Details of that I wouldn't know, but that's just something to keep in mind if you ever choose to register for an on-campus elective. But everything that's required for the program and the strongly suggested courses that I'm usually advising students to take, all of that is always going to be offered. You're always going to have the offerings that you need for being like fully online and part-time, wherever you are connecting from in the world. It's just some of the key electives that might really interest you, being mindful that they might not always be tailored for an online program because they could be serving students, outside just ours. Any questions up to this point? Okay, I think everything's being answered in the chat right now, so thanks, Doobie. Okay, the next thing, well, okay, briefly. I just want to show you this snapshot of lots of courses that we offer within the department. This is by no means comprehensive. There are so many more, and we have a pretty large faculty in the Department of Learning and Instruction, so there's always like new offerings, and our faculty are always proposing special topics that are coming up related to evolving trends in the field. But to just, again, emphasize that like we have lots of options and lots of opportunities. And if you're somebody who is just thinking that you're going to propose a problem of practice that cuts across multiple disciplines, this is definitely a place that welcomes and encourages you to do that. Um, Okay, so one other thing that you have probably noticed within this curriculum map, other than the courses I've mentioned, is these bold asterisk names of the pre-qualifying paper, the qualifying paper, the DIP proposal, and the DIP and defense. So one of the things that I think, one of the things that I love most about our program, I'm most proud of about our program and how it differentiates itself from a lot of other doctoral programs is that it embeds the development of your dissertation and practice throughout the 3-year journey. Lots of doctoral programs out there use the approach of complete all of your coursework first, like for the first 2-3 years, whatever it takes. And then at the end, you're left with this like kind of large, daunting, kind of intimidating project of doing the full dissertation from start to finish. I don't think that any part of earning a doctorate is easy by any means, but I will say that I often hear, like, from prospective students or students I might just, be engaging with if they're early on in their program, saying something to the effect of like, I just need to get through my coursework and then like everything will be great. And I'm like, coursework relative to doing the dissertation is arguably kind of like the easier part of the process. At this point, people coming into this program, you've earned your undergraduate degrees, you've earned your master's degrees, like the terrain of taking courses and doing the work necessary to succeed in them, right? The dissertation is often the part of the process that is new for most people, unless you are coming from a research background. And so rather than designing a program where students complete all of their coursework first and then are left with this huge research project at the end, we infuse it throughout years 1, 2, and 3 so that by the time you get to the end of year 3, you only have your 4th chapter left to complete. So your dissertation and practice is comprised of 4 chapters. You finish the draft of your first by the end of year 1. You finish the draft of your 2nd chapter by the middle of fall 2, where it says qualifying paper here. You finish a draft of your chapter 3, which is the kind of the equivalent of the research you're proposing by the end of year 2. And then finally, your final dissertation, all 4 chapters and your final defense are completed at the end of year 3. And so this really positions students for greater success. We think to see them build it along the way. And by the time they get to year 4 or to year 3 and they're completing chapter 4, it's more about like synthesizing, refining, and putting those final touches on a really strong piece of scholarship, as opposed to, kind of that intense beat the clock writing project that you've got for just a couple semesters before graduation. Kristen, I don't know if this is another area where you might want to jump in and share your experience with that.
Yeah, so I think related to what Tiffany said, like there's not anything that's like necessarily easy about a dissertation, but the way that the curriculum map is laid out and the milestones are sort of scaffolded is helpful. Whereas I think in other programs you may not find this sort of layout. So it's been not easy, but easier, I think, because of the milestones that are built in and just the like knowing when these deadlines are coming up and how they're sort of built into the program. It's exceptionally helpful.
Thanks, Kristen. And it's also like, for anybody who is coming from an education background, I consider these milestones like these are formative feedback milestones. Like this is the opportunity to say, like, get that feedback from, your committee members, from your advisor during year 1 and year 2 and year 3, and not getting like all of that feedback for, the first time or in a really substantive way at the same time that you're trying to like lead into the graduation stage. And so I think it's a really great opportunity for students to get feedback and learn from that feedback as they go. And then they still have all of this time between the first time that feedback comes and the second time that feedback comes until the time that they're actually graduating. And so that's really important to us too, because of course our goal is to position you for success. Some programs call these exams, and we really call them like feedback milestones along the way. Okay. So briefly, what do those look like? So as I was mentioning, like each of these milestones is the development of like the what ultimately becomes the final drafts of your dissertation in practice. So your pre-qualifying paper takes the form of a 10-page essay where you're really defending your problem. So as you might know, anybody who's read through the application requirements, students are expected to apply to the program with an idea for the problem of practice they want to study. It to before it's officially considered like a solidified problem that you are pursuing for your research, you have an entire year. So summer, fall, and spring are your time to learn about that problem. It will probably shift. It will evolve from how you
It will
originally.
shift.
Yes, Kristen can say that with
It
confidence.
will not probably, it will shift.
It will shift, and it's meant to, like it's supposed to. And so we expect that, you're kind of applying with that general sense of like what's motivating you to be in this program. We want you to come in with like some sort of idea of what you're looking at and what you're seeing, but with the understanding that based on everything you learned during year one, that idea will evolve, and we encourage it to evolve, because if your mindset or ideas or perspectives on that problem haven't shifted at all within a year, I would say, well, what are our courses not doing that isn't sort of like pushing you to think a little bit more critically about that problem, based on how you initially perceived it to what you know now. So at the end of spring, there's like a 10-page essay that's basically the defense of your now solidified problem of practice. And you'll get feedback from your committee, which is typically comprised of your advisor and a second committee member at that time. And we do this in a way where students are defending on panels. So you actually have an opportunity to defend with some of your peers in the program, like alongside. And that kind of warms you up to the process of defending so that you don't have to do it independently the first time, and you kind of learn it, and then are better prepared for your individual defenses that come in later years. Your qualifying paper, this is what eventually becomes like the chapter 2 of your dissertation in practice, which is really doing a thorough analysis of the literature that already exists on your topic. So this is where you're starting to develop that expertise around, like, if I'm going to be studying a problem, I really need to know everything about this problem and how it's been studied previously. And so you're doing a deep dive and review into existing literature, and that comprises, again, what ultimately becomes chapter 2. Your proposal here, which is your third milestone that takes place at the end of year 2, is how at this stage you're proposing the study that you want to conduct. So you're like, I've got my problem. I've done a lot of research into the existing scholarship on my problem, and now I'm going to talk about how I want to enter that scholarly conversation with my own study. And so this can be like a really exciting and empowering part for students in the journey, because it's sort of like, you have everything that you need to know, and now it's time for you to like take that initiative to develop the study that you want to be reflective of the change that you seek to make in the world. So a really exciting time. And then once you pass that proposal defense, it's moving into year 3, which again is like you're going out and you're collecting your data, you're analyzing it. We have a course during that time that walks you through like how to analyze and how to prepare for that process, so that you kind of know what to expect once the data are actually in front of you. And then, of course, that data analysis works itself into the presentation of the findings and what they mean and why they matter. So if you look at how all of this is laid out, and again, just the brief snapshot of the curriculum map, we really want students by the end of year 2 and the start of year 3 to feel like they know there might be a lot of work ahead, but want them to feel like they know what they need to do to reach this spring 3 graduation semester. And based on the experiences of the cohort that is graduating in spring, like I said, everybody is really well positioned for success. So briefly here, again, it just kind of shows you the main components of chapters 1, 2, 3, and 4, which I already talked through. Different types of dissertations in practice that folks might propose usually look like one of the following 3 here on the screen. An exploration study is typically designed when students have identified a problem, but maybe like they're really coming into it without a ton of background on it, or like not much has really been done or written about to address the problem. Like you're kind of coming at it in a really exploratory way to just even understand the problem. an intervention or innovation study is typically like maybe there's a problem and you've already done some preliminary work to understand the problem, why it exists, how it's occurring, and you want to design a study where you can actually like intervene with something and maybe look at like where did we start with this problem, and as a result of my intervention, like what occurred? Did the problem improve? Did it change in some way? So usually that might take place when people already feel like they've done the exploratory part and they're ready to actually take an action. And the last one, an outcome study, might be an example of like, this is when there's already maybe been something that has been implemented for a while, but maybe hasn't been systematically studied to understand its effectiveness. So let's say that you work at a school and a couple years ago you launched like a peer-to-peer mentoring program, for example, because you felt like, okay, we saw that there was an issue with mentorship and, we wanted to try and find this creative way to fill it. So you implemented this peer mentoring program, but nobody has actually systematically collected or analyzed data to understand what its actual impacts have been on the original problem you sought to address. So it's almost kind of like a retroactive study in which you might be saying like, okay, the what we wanted to implement or do is actually already at play, but now we need to actually analyze how well it's working. And based on those data, we can, iterate and continuously improve what we're doing to enhance its impact. Okay, so before I move into a brief review of what's required for the application, do folks have any questions?
I get one question. Is there a way to look at dissertations completed by former students?
Yes, and so two ways that, and I can send these through like for follow-up links when the recording goes out. There is the dissertations in practice that are published to UB's repository. So every time a student graduates from our program, like their dissertation becomes like a part of the UB library, right? Like it's a piece of published scholarship. It's pretty cool. And so we can share those so you can see examples. And another great place is through the Carnegie Project on the Education Doctorate Consortium that I mentioned earlier, because it serves so many member institutions. You're going to see so many different types of dissertations in practice, just over the years, right? Like even more than we would be able to share through UB just because there's so many more universities. And so if you're looking for examples on like a specific topic or a specific field or specific methods that were used, it may very well be possible to find like a related study through looking through that repository. So I can easily share links to both of those for you to peruse.
Thank you for that. The next question we got is there any resources or support available for students trying to develop their academic writing at the doctoral level?
So I would say that the process of going through like the courses and what you're going to be writing for the courses and the completion and like this, this iterative process of writing your dissertation and practice chapters is definitely like an exercise in continuously improving, your research writing, your academic, your scholarly writing. So a lot of that I do think kind of happens organically through the program, and you're going to see, how other people are writing. You're going to be reading these articles and saying like, oh, I see how they did that. And like, I kind of want to model my own writing after what was presented here. So a lot of that is sort of embedded in the organic experience. But what we also have like, and especially just, if you're somebody who's new to the genre, we do have a writing center, and the writing center is like you can create, appointments to have your writing reviewed, to have things edited for consultations. So between the resources that are already available and within the program and like your advisor and your peers and all of that support, there are the institutional resources for that as well, which I again think is another benefit of UB being such a large research intensive university with a lot of opportunity. Any other questions that I might have missed? I feel like there's so many popping up and I can't keep up.
No, we're up to date. The last question we got was whether or not a student should use the resume or curriculum vitae, and is there a format that is more acceptable than the other?
Yeah, so I would say what you choose to submit really makes no difference. I would say, just it's more about what's in those two different formats, right? So if you're somebody who like already has a developed CV, and you've been developing using that format for a while, I would just say like polish it up, add anything new and send it right along. And if you're somebody who's been using a resume, like it doesn't count against you to not extend it into a big detailed CV. If there are any follow-up questions, like things that we want to learn more about, we can always reach out to and ask you. Sometimes, we might reach out and follow up if we want to have like, just a conversation or an interview, things like that. But really, it doesn't make a difference either way. I would just polish up whatever you typically use and send it along. If you do have, this is, it's an applied professional doctorate, so we do like to learn about like what have been some of the experiences that you've had so far, in your field. We do like to have a good understanding of that. And if you have done any, like it's certainly not like a barrier to being admitted or anything, like if you don't have publications, but if you have done some sort of writing, right, and you've published even in like a non-academic capacity, we of course, would love to see those sorts of things as well. And so you can always include links, in your resume or CV if there's other examples, of your project or your portfolio in whatever field that may be that you would want to show us, and we'd be happy to see. Kristen.
I don't know if the application has changed since I filled it out 30 years ago. But I remember there being a section asking for like potential faculty like connections. So maybe you can kind of talk through what that might look like, particularly for this program, since there's not really like, you're not working directly with like a faculty if it's, like a PhD program where you have to find somebody that's sort of like in that field or studying that topic.
Yes, thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for raising that. And so so the section on the application that might ask which faculty members, which faculty members have research that maybe overlaps with your interests, you would be interested in working with or learning from. In our program for the first year, and sometimes it just continues, but for the first year as the program director, I serve as everybody's advisor. So I'm like the automatic assigned advisor. That's, just as the program director to kind of help everybody get started and to make sure that everybody is, starting in a good place. Why it is helpful for us within your application to know the faculty members whose research you're interested in is it can really help us with the formation of the committees that then, get formed as your problem of practice topic develops. So it also, let's say that you're proposing a study that is really like outside of my wheelhouse, right? So like a good example of this might be a very sophisticated quantitative study taking place in a science related discipline. Okay, that would be a little bit outside of my wheelhouse as a former high school English teacher. So I would say in that case, knowing that that's like the focus area for where you want your study to develop, I might start working with you in the first semester just to kind of get you going with your courses and help get you set up. Let's say, we've got another faculty member in our department who's like a quant expert, who's a science ed expert. And if you're interested in working with them and they have that advising availability, we might want to make that advising match right away so that you have the guidance and the support from somebody who has that expertise. Either way, like whether I continue serving as your advisor or you move with a different advisor, the purpose of the committees is that you have faculty expertise that collectively provides you with the content-based and the methodological-based expertise that you need to conduct your research effectively. And so it's always like my job as the program director to make sure that students have that wraparound support, and knowing the different like faculty members that you're interested in working with and why you're interested in working with them from the time the application comes through. I take those notes and I keep those notes and use them during our advising conversations to help you facilitate those connections and make recommendations for how to build out those committees over time. We also have a really just like, faculty members that would love to chat and like connect with you and meet with you and learn about your interests. And so if you ever, want to reach out to me or are like, I've seen, this faculty member's profile, I'm so interested in their work, would love to like learn more, you're welcome to reach out to me. I'm happy to facilitate a connection, things like that, to just kind of get connected to our program and learn about some of the different ways to connect with the experts that are excited to hopefully welcome you and teach you throughout this journey. All right. So in addition to that, just briefly here, the statement of educational and career goals, just like why are you applying to this program? What are your academic goals, your career goals, and how do you see this program maybe equipping you with, the skills, knowledge, experience, community connections that you're looking for those academic and professional goals. The problem of practice statement, which we've talked about a little bit throughout this presentation, but like what is that problem you've identified and what information has drawn you to that specific issue? So like just trying to do trying to help us understand not only like what the problem is, like define what that problem is, but like how do you know that the problem exists, right? And like why do you think it's a worthwhile pursuit of study? Like why are you applying to a full doctoral program to study it? Again, it doesn't have to be set in stone. You're not submitting your application and then like committing to this POP for life, but it does help us understand your motivations and to make sure that we have the types of experiences and expertise that can really support you in studying that problem. Unofficial transcripts from colleges attended. I believe that upon acceptance and decision to attend, you are required to submit the official transcripts. Contact information for professional references. So one of the things that I like about our program is, yes, we do ask for references. And it's possible that the application has been updated to 2 professional references. So don't quote me on the 3. It's either 2 or 3. But one of the things that I like is that we create like we have an internal survey that is created and that it's sent to your references. So you don't have to ask people to write a letter or tailor that letter. If you're applying to multiple programs, we provide our own survey that will be automatically sent to them with some Likert scale questions and then some open-ended questions. So we try of course, we want to learn about you through the perspectives of people who have worked with you, but also try not to make it, like the type of thing that for some students can serve as like a barrier if they don't have recommenders that submit letters on time. So just letting your recommenders know earlier, but also that it shouldn't take up too much of their time to support you in that effort. And then a $50 non-refundable application fee. So any other questions about the application?
Not about the application, but a student wants to know how large are the cohorts?
Yeah, so typically anywhere from 25 to 35 has been our range. So 25 was our first cohort, and then we've been experimenting with like the 35 students to a cohort size, but really without exceeding that. So 25 to 35 is the sweet spot. And it's kind of nice to have a range because it's also dependent on the applications we're receiving, right? So if we have like some really outstanding applications, even if we were thinking maybe closer to a 25 student cohort, but we see some of those amazing applications, it might, raise us to closer to 30 or 35. Okay. So briefly, and then I'll turn it over to you all for questions. This might be the kind of information that's more helpful to just sort of like review after this session or go back to the slides. But as you're thinking about, if you do decide to apply and you're reflecting on problems of practice, just understanding again what a problem of practice is. It is and should be something that's observable and something that is actionable in a local setting where you would be able to actually conduct research that could produce the kinds of findings and insights that allow you to take action on that problem in some way. They do require some form of evidence to demonstrate their existence. And so you might be writing your problem of practice statement and saying, well, these are the things that I've observed in my local context. Like I've had these observations, I've had these conversations, but what does the literature say about this topic, right? Like, is there any other, research that's been done on this topic before and like help contextualize what you're seeing in what we already know based on the scholarship that exists in the field. And so different so make sure, it's an authentic problem, it's a researchable problem, it's a relevant problem, and then, that you can define and articulate it clearly. So those are just like some of the self-reflective steps to walk through as you're proposing the problem. And examples of, these are just some examples, don't nearly reflect all of what you could do. But you might say, like, what is the role of anti-bias education in our classrooms and schools? And what are the relevant community issues that we would like our classes in school to actively address? So maybe that is like somebody who's looking at a problem at like a district level, Whereas, like, how do the assignments support effective group learning? What teacher behaviors support productive group learning? Maybe that's a type of problem of practice that's being studied in like a school site. But again, it's not limited to like K-12 spaces. We certainly love and always welcome students from those spaces, but it certainly extends to other fields and backgrounds as well. And so with that, I'm going to just jump into the Q&A section and leave it open for any other questions folks might have.
As you're thinking, I can tell you about my dissertation and practice if that's helpful. So my background, I work in higher ed. I started in student affairs and have transitioned recently into academic affairs. But coming into the program, I was really interested in emergency management in higher ed, and sort of what that looks like in on college campuses. And so through year one, my topic morphed a little bit. And so what I realized was that there's a particular subset of college students that need some of that education, and those are our pre-service teachers, or our student teachers who are going out to K-12 sites. And what I realized through my research is that there is not a curriculum for that in New York State for pre-service teachers. And so what I decided to do was an intervention study with pre-service teachers at an institution, a higher education institution. And so we did a series of workshops with a workshop questionnaire and a post-workshop questionnaire, and written reflections to gather data about what they were learning. And so my hope through that process is to be able to, promote the idea of teaching that curriculum to our pre-service teachers, because that's information that they likely aren't getting. So hopefully that helps.
Thank you so much, Kristen. And you all should come and attend her public dissertation defense in the spring.
Yeah, do that. Everyone's welcome.
Any other questions folks might have in our last minute or two? Okay, well, I want to obviously thank all of you so much for coming to attend tonight. I hope that this was informative. I know it's a lot of information, so like I said before, I'm just an email away. I'm happy to hop on a call or a Zoom if you have more questions, and especially if you have some questions that you feel like these might be very specific and particular, like to my situation, more than happy to talk that through with you. And then thanks so much to Kristen as our wonderful program ambassador, and to Duvie and to both of you for just fielding all of the questions in the chat. Super, super helpful, because I saw that there were many good ones coming through. So with that, Duvie, anything else, or are we good?
No, I think we're good. I'm going to end.